Chris Ross is in the house. Time to talk some Big 12 football. Chris joins us from Land Grant Gauntlet. You can just type in thelgg.com and find his website right there, and also his podcast, Talking Big 12 Football, at Quick Slant. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Football, Big 12 football, just 2 weeks away.
It certainly is. And we had a great discussion, I thought, last week talking about national perception, the direction of the programs at the top, the general direction of Big 12 football in terms of win-losses on the field and revenue and so forth. So now we have another topic of perception leading into the games of week one, and that's, of course, the AP Top 25 poll that was released just a few hours ago. So you got a top five of Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, USC, and Clemson, with Alabama garnishing 52 votes to Ohio State's 3 and Florida State's 4. So the consensus is that Alabama is the best football team in the country. Okay, Oklahoma at 7, Oklahoma State at 10. Then down the list, Kansas State at 20, West Virginia and Texas at 22 and 23. That means 5 Big 12 teams in the top 25, as opposed to, let's say, the Big 10 with 4 teams bunched up at the top, but little else after that. So your impressions of this preseason top 25?
I think it speaks to the strength of the Big 12 top to bottom. Oklahoma State, definite top 10 teams. I like that. West Virginia, Kansas State, very strong. I think if there's any question, it's probably with Texas being ranked, but that speaks to the excitement around Tom Herman. TCU, another team, they received the most votes that didn't get ranked. So they're kind of right there on the outside looking in, another team that could easily be in here in a couple of weeks. So very strong for the Big 12.
So I love what you have to say about TCU, because we get hung up on numbers. Let's look at the top 10 or the top 25, or the top 100 players. Well, there might be a guy at 103 who's just as good as the guy at 95. It's just a ranking, and you have to cut it off at some point. So TCU at 26, basically you put them in the group of teams that are in that 20 to 25 to 30 range. And so they're right there. So is there anything that you would disagree with in regards to order of the Big 12 teams, or their ranking within the overall top 25 nationally?
Not too much. I think Oklahoma State are to be expected. I wouldn't be surprised to see them move up. Several people have Oklahoma State as a Final Four team, so maybe at 10th they're being a little underrated, but nothing to complain about. Kansas State and West Virginia, I believe that these are solid dark horse teams. Kansas State finished the season very strong. West Virginia, with quarterback Will Grier, they think they're going to have a very, very strong team. Again, they lose a little bit on defense, but they like the guys they have on campus. So both of those teams, you could see them moving higher into the rankings as well.
All right. Not that I'm going to gain too many supporters from your fan base when I list my top 25, but I released this a few weeks ago after the coaches preseason poll was on the streets, and I've got 3, not 5 teams from the Big 12 in the top 25. So I'm going to have to be proven that the conference is going to play a little bit better against the better opponents, i.e. West Virginia against Virginia Tech, Texas against USC. And again, as we discussed last week, not necessarily a win out of the Longhorns on the road against what we consider, most of us, a legitimate top 5 team, but a good performance. So I've got OU at 8, Oklahoma State at 14, and Kansas State at 25. Those are my 3, and I'm leaving out Texas and West Virginia right now. But I update those week to week based on the performance on the field. So much like the College Football Playoff Committee, and I can completely support this approach, if this gets just completely changed based on the results after week 1 and week 2, and we see most of the big non-conference matchups, I'm good with that. Just because you're sitting at number 4 and you just don't look very impressive against inferior foes, let's say, for 2 weeks, you're going to get dropped in my poll, because it's a track record poll. What have you shown us, and your resume changes each and every week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all we can do at this point. It's all conjecture. But based on what we're seeing, based on what we think out of the Big 12, they're trending back up. So definitely, I think you've undersold West Virginia quite a bit. I would be surprised if they're not in the top 25 when all is said and done. Kansas State as well. They're going to have a very, very solid, gritty team. We know what they can do when they have a down team. They can still play gritty. They can still hang in there. They can still win games. When they have a very solid team, they're that much harder to beat. Only teams to beat Kansas State, you're going to have to make them play catch up to get them out of their game. Only a limited amount of teams are going to be able to do that this year. So I think they're a very solid team. The team that I'm most concerned with in the top 25 would be Texas. And you mentioned the matchup with USC there, having to prove it. That's going to be a tough sell for US or for Texas there, because USC is a top 5 team. Texas is a questionable top 25 team. They're kind of in on hype at this moment. We haven't seen it on the field yet. So it should be a good year though.
So Chris, I'll make a disclaimer that this is not a prediction. So this is not how I'm predicting that these 25 teams are going to finish. I think, based on my observation of play at the end of last season, the losses, the personnel losses, the recruiting classes, all the things that make a transition from year to year possible and go into the formula, these are what I believe to be the 25 best teams in the country in this order. Now, if I applied a schedule to this, that may change my predictions. So if the 5th best team in the country plays an extremely difficult schedule, and none of us know, nor do I know who truly is the 5th best team in the country, but based on my observation, who I perceive to be the 5th best team in the country, if they play a brutal schedule, they may finish 18th in the country. And the 25th best team in the country may play a cupcake schedule and finish 14th. So these are simply my evaluation of the top, what I believe to be the top 25 teams in the country. So, i.e., West Virginia finishes 10-2 last year in the regular season, and they were 13th or 14th in the country, something like that. I don't believe that they were the 13th or 14th best team in the country, but if you play Power 5 football and you have the semblance of respect that West Virginia football typically gets, then you're going to be ranked there because you're 10-2.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Scheduling plays a big role in it all when it's all said and done. But I mean, right now going into, I can't disagree with too much of your rankings there. I don't myself put together a top 25 poll because it is when we follow the Big 12 and pay so much attention to the Big 12, it is harder to kind of, it would be an injustice to try to rank everybody else when you're not paying that much attention to them. So, I mean, but what you said, I like it, other than it needs a few more Big 12 teams. Other than that, it's good.
I appreciate you still coming on, Chris.